The Rokka no Yuusha anime only covered Volume 1, and I'm about to spoil literally all of Volume 2. I recommend watching the anime before this video, but here's a brief summary of the story anyways. Now the anime was faithful to the novel, so we will begin with Rokka, Braves of the Six Flowers, Volume 2. Adlet climbs the cliff and looks up to see Hansa's lifeless body. Rolonia is currently in a daze trying to heal the corpse, while Maura sits a little ways off, covered in blood. I do want to clarify that this all happened within the first 5 pages. The story then jumps to Maura's past, where we find her training 3 different saints, one of which being Nashantania. Later on that evening, we are then introduced to Maura's daughter, Shanira. Snapping back to what I'm going to call the present, we find our 7 braves leaving the temple and heading into the Howling Vile Lands. Along the way, Rolonia heals Adlet's wounds while Maura and Fremy scout ahead. Her name is Flamey in the anime, but it's actually Fremy in the novels. While they are away, we come to find out that Rolonia, the Saint of Blood, has an extremely timid personality, and was also known as a schmuck of a saint. Fremy then returns, pointing out the fact that Maura personally trained Rolonia, and we also learn that Adlet met Rolonia a few years prior. Maura then returns, claiming that she didn't see any enemies. However, in reality, she had stumbled upon a solitary fiend, which told her she's running out of time. Next, we find our group resting on top of a hill discussing who might be the 7th, and then Fremy explains the fiend's hierarchy. Apparently the fiends are ruled by 3 commanders, Karjik the Brute, Tegernu the Trickster, and Dazu the Traitor. Typically, fiends are more or less mindless minions, but somehow these 3 monsters have obtained their own desires and emotions. Fremy also mentions that she was created under Trickster's orders, and that he has a multitude of human slaves in the Vile Lands. Trickster then bursts out of the ground, and upon seeing him, Adlet burns with anger, as this is the monster that essentially killed his family. Adlet charges in, but gets knocked away, just as Trickster blocks 4 simultaneous attacks, which included catching a bullet with his teeth. Let's pause this battle to go 3 years into the past, where Maura's daughter Shanira became very sick. They were desperate, so they called in the Saint of Medicine, but even her magic was unable to cure little Shanira. However, shortly after the Saint of Medicine left the temple, Maura receives a letter from her. Next, we find Maura outside of a fortress accompanied by Marmana. Marmana is the Saint of Words, and her powers allow her to create unbreakable contracts. They enter into the fortress, where they find Trickster having a feast. He openly admits to forging the letter and planting a parasite inside of Shanira's heart. Trickster then tells Maura that in order to save her daughter's life, she must kill the Braves of the Six Flowers, but of course Maura refuses. Back to the present, we find Trickster signaling for reinforcements. Hans, Goldoff, and Shamo go to deal with the reinforcements, while the remaining 4 of them attack Trickster. Maura, Adlet, and Fremy fail to land a single attack, so Adlet tethers himself to Trickster in an attempt to slow its movements. This method is effective, and Rolonia joins the fray, screaming insults as she violently attacks with her whip. In response to this, Trickster loudly exclaims he's going to use his trump card, as he jokingly pulls out a fig to snack on. However, his attitude turns serious as he breaks the tether and throws a bomb into the air. This bomb explodes, raining down silver powder onto Shamo's fiends, incapacitating them. Hans and Goldoff protect Shamo as she recalls her fiends and begins puking up the silver substance. Adlet sprints towards Trickster in a rage, but gets knocked back multiple times. Hans jumps in to stop Adlet, but actually uses him as a springboard, restraining one of Trickster's arms. Maura quickly grabs his other arm, allowing Adlet to stab a primitive-looking spike into Trickster's stomach. Trickster's entire body convulses due to the anti-fiend poison, and Adlet can finally relax, knowing that he avenged his family. Bam! Trickster knocks him unconscious with a single punch. Upon seeing this, Hans orders everyone to retreat, and they flee to the Bud of Eternity. Jumping back in time again, we find that Maura and Trickster have finally come to an agreement. Maura has agreed to kill a single brave within 22 days of the evil god's revival in order to save her daughter. However, killing herself does not count, and Shanira can also be freed by killing Trickster. Trickster also swears that it will never lie to Maura. As the Braves reach the bud of eternity, Trickster attempts to persuade Fremy, and then warns Maura that she only has 2 days remaining, which is odd, because according to their contract, she should have 9 days left. Now, the Bud of Eternity is a fiend-repelling barrier, which was created by the original Saint. Inside this safe haven, Adlet jolts awake and begins preparing for battle, but Fremy stops him as she undresses to take a bath. Maura and Rolonia enter the bath with Fremy, where we come to find out that Fremy seems kind of jealous of Rolonia and Adlet's friendship. Next, our group discusses the 7th, to no avail, just before splitting up. Adlet, Rolonia, and Fremy try to figure out how Trickster survived the Saint Spike. Hans and Goldoff leave to kill some fiends, while Maura uses her mountain magic to act as their guide. Then Little Shamo reinforces her fiends by covering them in animal fat. After a while, Hans and Goldoff return to find that Adlet's group is still completely clueless as to how Trickster survived. Maura then creates a gigantic anti-fiend barrier, effectively trapping Trickster on the mountain. This allows Adlet, Hans, Goldoff, and Rolonia to head back to the hill in search of clues. Our group arrives at the hill, and Adlet swiftly jumps into the hole, where he finds a small room with a passage on each end. He explores one passage but doesn't find anything, so Goldoff drops into the hole and begins searching the other. Adlet then sprays the entire room with the fiend detecting stuff that he used in the anime. Back at the Bud of Eternity, we find Maura using her magic to talk to Trickster, as he explains why Maura only has 2 days remaining. You see, Trickster had forged a letter addressed from Maura to the Saint of Salt, asking her to kill Shanira if she is not cured by a specific date. Inside the hill, Adlet discovered traces of 2 different fiends, one of which being small enough to fit into your hand. He then enters the passage to go and retrieve Goldoff. Now, realizing that she only has 2 days left causes Maura to panic. She decides the best course of action is to use the bomb implanted inside of her body to suicide bomb Trickster. Fremy attempts to stop Maura from leaving, however Shamo gets in the way, allowing Maura to escape. She heads down the mountain, easily knocking enemies out of her way, until she encounters a very large reptilian fiend. Adlet picks up his pace as he hears screaming and snapping. He turns the corner to find Goldoff, standing over top of a fiend's corpse, which he apparently tortured and killed with his bare hands. Goldoff shares that before dying, the fiend said something like,
"I could kill you if I had Trickster's power."
This short phrase sparked an idea in Adlet's brain, and he orders everyone to begin searching the area for something specific. Maura finally kills the large reptile and charges straight for Trickster. However, Shamo uses her fiends to restrain Maura. Trickster then orders all of his minions to sacrifice themselves by diving into the barrier, and this is the moment Maura realizes that she played right into Trickster's hand, as she is now too exhausted to maintain the barrier. Trickster then exclaims that Maura is the 7th Brave, just as he is swallowed by another fiend, allowing him to escape the now weakened barrier. Fremy then orders Shamo to go find Adlet while she keeps watch over Maura. Though once Shamo is gone, Maura makes her move, barely dodging a bullet to knock out Fremy. Flashing back to the past once again, we find Maura meeting Rolonia for the first time. Now, Rolonia wants to relinquish her powers, but Maura notices that she has an unusually high affinity for magic. Thus, Maura begins training Rolonia for combat and healing, because Maura is planning to use Rolonia in her plot to murder a Brave. At the Bud of Eternity, we find Maura spreading a weakening drug around the cave just before calling back Shamo. Shamo returns and enters the cave, where she is swiftly knocked unconscious. Maura then leaves the cave, preparing to kill a Brave. Adlet's group then finds what they were searching for and dash back to the mountain with their theory confirmed. On their way back though, Maura calls out to them, stating that Fremy ran away, and she orders Hans and Goldoff to follow her. Though Hans finds Blue kind of sus, so he chooses to go to Maura alongside Rolonia, as Adlet and Goldoff chase after Fremy. A few moments later, Adlet and Goldoff realize that they've been bamboozled, but they are now surrounded by fiends. Maura casually approaches Hans, who throws his light at her, following it up with an attack. Maura barely managed to dodge the attack and they immediately begin fighting. Hans clearly has an overwhelming advantage, so Maura takes a fully defensive stance in an attempt to withstand the assault. Adlet and Goldoff just finished off their enemies and head to the Bud of Eternity where they find the unconscious Frimmy and Shamo. They quickly wake them up and head towards Hans. We find that Maura's defense has finally collapsed, and Hans plans to finish this with a backstab. However, Maura launches herself backwards onto his sword, slamming into Hans. She follows this up with a kick and a punch to his chest, incapacitating him. Then after narrowly winning the battle, Maura picks up one of Hans's swords and very meticulously slices open his neck. Adlet then watches as a petal disappears from his crest, signaling the death of a brave. He climbs the cliff and looks up to find Hans's lifeless body. Rolonia is in a daze trying to heal the corpse, while Maura sits a little ways off covered in blood, simply saying that she didn't want to do it this way. She then instructs Rolonia to return Hans's blood to his body and to keep his heart pumping. Adlet quickly realizes what transpired, and he kneels down, breathing into Hans. Miraculously, Hans begins coughing as the sixth petal reappears on their crest. Maura then explains everything, and the group discusses whether or not they should kill her. Adlet then deduces that Maura is not the seventh, and that the trickster they know actually died inside of the fiend that swallowed him. However, this wasn't the real Trickster, because you see, Trickster has the ability to control other fiends, and his real body is actually the fig that monster was eating. They confirmed this by spraying a piece of the fig, which they found on the hill. And this even explains how Trickster was able to lie to Maura, telling her that she was the supposed seventh, without dying from the contract. Congratulations, Shanira has been saved, followed by a brief glimpse of Karjik just before we witness Nashantania regroup with her ally, Dazu the traitor. Now, when making these videos, I leave out a ton of details, so I highly recommend reading the books for yourself. And if you buy the books through the link down below, it will help support the channel. If I've already uploaded Rokka Part 2, then it will be on screen now. But if I haven't, then go check out my After the Anime series covering Grimgar. Shout out to my patrons, and thanks for watching everyone. I hope to see you next time.